So now we're trekking through towns and cities, getting lifts with buggies and wagons and trucks. And we finally, and then my mother and father get typhoid. We were living in this hut. They had these huts that were built from mud and straw. And that's the way people lived. So we were living in one. There were people next to us living in one. And both my parents got typhoid. They were taken away. The people, this is my worst memory of the war. First of all, that I was left alone. The people next door took me in, and they tortured me. They were nuts. And they were Jewish people. But they were totally nuts. You know, how should I say it? Mental illness isn't only for other people. Jewish people have it too. These people were insane. They undressed me completely. I was only in my little panties. They tied me down to the floor with a rope around my neck. And that's how I would lie there. And if I made a pee-pee or anything, they would kick me and hit me. I mean, they were monsters. I used to chew on the rope at night. And one night, it broke. And I thought I'm going to run, but I couldn't even walk. I was like so weak. I guess if I was there another week, I would be dead. So I crawled. And I kept crawling. This was very early in the morning. It was like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I kept crawling, and somewhere I just sat down because I was totally exhausted. And this was, I guess, around 6 in the morning because the sun started to come up. And there was a troop of soldiers. You know, life is serendipity, you know? It's all coincidences. There's a troop of soldiers marching, and one of the men started to yell, "Danusha," my name. And he came over and he asked me, "Where is your mother? Where's your father?" And, you know, I could hardly talk. I was just crying. And he asked the commandant, you know, if he could take the day off and he could place me somewhere, you know. And he got the day off. This was a friend of my father's. His name was Stashik. So he took me to a market. He washed me, you know, and he bought me a little smock. And he carried me all the time. And then he bought, there was a bread that they made in Asia. It was called lepioshka. It's like the Indian naan. Actually, they bake it the same way in those round ovens, you know. So he bought one and he fed me like little drops at a time because he was afraid if I would eat it fast, people died from that. When they were starving and then they started eating very quickly, they died.
So you were at this point in the Asian part of it?
In the Asian part already, not our destination, but almost there. And he put me in placed me in an orphanage. I always used to think it was a Christian orphanage, but after speaking to Olga, she said it must have been a Russian Orthodox orphanage, which was very similar religion. So they placed me there. When I came there, they shaved my hair because of lice. And there were a lot of children there, and we slept sort of on boards, you know, there were boards. The nuns were very good to us, but there was no food. You know, it was war. And I remember they put a wooden cross on me. And I remember because they must have known that I was Jewish. And we used to climb these stairs up to, it was a statue of Mary with Jesus, you know, as a baby. And we used to pray there. And I always prayed that my parents would find me. And I always used to, please, 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 I knew nothing about religion. We never talked about religion. I didn't know what I was. So this went on day after day. I remember Christmas, we got each child got a grape, one grape. And we used to peel it slowly, you know, so it should last for a long time. I was so starving and so malnutritious And when you see those pictures of children in Biafra, you know, their eyes are popping out, the skeletal was showing, my intestine was out. I was like really in bad shape. And when we used to play in this big, big yard. And the gates were made out of those trees, you know, those white little trees. They're very thin.
Birch tree?
Birch, maybe. You know, they're white and they're thin. So the gate was made, so there were spaces in between. And one day we're in the yard playing, and I see this eye of a person, and I start to yell, "Mama!" I knew it was my mother. She would have never recognized me because, you know, she left a child that looked, you know, pretty okay, and here I was totally skeletal. Anyway, it was a fabulous reunion, you could imagine.
How did they know you were there? Did they?
They didn't. They checked every orphanage, every hospital. They were searching for me for I don't know, months maybe. But they checked every morgue, and this was one of the orphanages that my mother was checking. And, I mean, if you see it in a movie, you would think, oh yeah, it's a made-up story, but it was true. And of course, my mother took me in she had a wagon waiting, and she took me in the wagon, and we sang Russian songs. And like, I couldn't believe it, that I was back with my mother. And of course, then when I was reunited with my father too, it was my best memory of the war.